Perpetuity. It's not a word we use that often, but it's something that does not need to be forgotten. Here's the way it's defined. Perpetual existence or duration. Endless. Perpetuate. To make perpetual or cause to last indefinitely. Perpetual. Continuing forever. Going on and on without interruption. So the time we have together on this occasion, I'd like to talk about the perpetuity of evil, because it continues, sometimes seems to accelerate. Why does humanity do that? It's been something that's a problem since the time of Cain and Abel. Jealousy, greed, selfishness, sometimes ignorance, the lack of understanding, a disposition that will not investigate a different point of view. Instead of being able to actually argue and defend a position, we just need to be violent. We've seen horrendous things lately on the world stage. But it's not something that's new. Again, it goes back to the time of Cain and Abel. When David is feeling the problems kind of surround him, those that really want to take away his throne, including a son named Absalom, what does he write? There's several chapters in the book of Psalms that really kind of deal with this problem. So for the time we have together, I'd like to talk about several things that David writes. For example, in chapter 35 of Psalms, verse 4, "Let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them be turned back and disappointed who devise evil against me." And he says in verse 7 and 8 of this chapter, "Without cause they hid their net for me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. Let destruction come upon him when he does not know it, and let the net that he hid ensnare him. Let him be the one that falls into it, to his destruction, not mine." The thought continues in verse 13. "When they were sick," his enemies, when they were sick, "I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest." My prayer was for them. "I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother." And he's talking about those enemies who were sick. "I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother, as one who laments the passing of his mother. I bowed down in mourning. My concern was for them, as hateful as they were to me." Verse 15 and 16, "But at my stumbling they rejoiced and gathered. They gathered together against me. Wretches whom I did not know tore at me without ceasing. Like profane mockers at a feast, they gnashed at me with their teeth. Let not those rejoice," verse 19, "let not those rejoice over me who are wrongfully my foes." It's not by my choosing. It's theirs. Verse 20, "They do not speak peace, but against those who are quiet in the land they devise words of deceit." People going about their business, and yet these individuals are using deceptive tactics to inflict pain, or worse, of those individuals who are at peace and live quietly in the land. Let's go from this chapter over to something that's stated in chapter 38, again by David. And he describes the frailty of himself. He is by no means perfect, and he acknowledges that. In verse 2, "There's no soundness in my flesh, no health in my bones because of my sinfulness." Verse 4, "My iniquities have gone over my head like a burden. They're too heavy for me." Verse number 6, "I'm utterly bowed down all the day as I go about mourning." Verse 8, "I'm feeble and crushed. I groan because of the tumult of my heart." The verse number 12, "Those who seek my life lay their snares. Those who seek my hurt speak of ruin and meditate treachery all day long." And then describes himself initially in verse 17, "I am ready to fall. My pain is ever before me. I confess my iniquity. I'm sorry for my sin. But my foes are vigorous. They are mighty, and many are those who hate me wrongfully, those who render me evil for good. They accuse me because I follow after good." Interesting observation. I want to do what's right. Sometimes I stumble and fall, but they repay me evil for good. In chapter 52, beginning in verse 1, why do you boast of evil? The steadfast love of God endures all the day long. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. And then he prays that God would stop that kind of deceit. God will break you down forever. In fact, in verse number 6, it says, the righteous will see and fear the person that is evil and deceitful and devising things that are wrong. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his destruction. It's interesting that Robert Alter, in his translation of the Hebrew of Psalms, has an interesting comment on the statement we just read out of Psalm chapter 52. In fact, I'd like to read the way that he translates what we just read out of the English Standard Version. Chapter 52, beginning in verse 3. Why boast of evil, O hero? God's kindness is all day long. Disasters your tongue devises. Like a well-honed razor doing deceit, your love is for evil. You love evil better than good, a lie more than speaking justice. You love all destructive words, the tongue of deceit. Then about the righteous shall see and be awed, be amazed, and laugh at him. Look, the man who does not make God his stronghold, who trusts in his great wealth, who would be strong in his disaster. And he describes the meaning of that term, of that phrase this way. Such a man imagines foolishly that he will remain strong in his disaster. Whenever we see disaster, sometimes you run across individuals that believe, erroneously so, that I'm going to pull through this particular problem unscathed. Who actually thinks that way? Sometimes people in power. Sometimes people blinded by greed. Some people who are so arrogant about their self-perception that they discount everybody around them. Common sense does not rule the day. Humanity continues to be very evil toward humanity. The atrocities of human beings against human beings seems endless. The reason there's no concept of the value of life, or really a knowledge of God in their heart, their mind, or their soul. The perpetuity of evil, persistence of evil, the fact that it continues to perpetuate itself. It's not to humanity's good, but to humanity's demise. Interesting chapters from the beloved King of Israel, King David. Please, stay safe. We'll talk again soon.